Adrian, welcome to Through Your Lens.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Now, we dive in at the deep end, and the first question I launch with is what was one of the most difficult moments of your life that, in hindsight, you can see that you've learned or you've grown as a person in that moment?
You do jump right in, don't you, Tom? Yeah, look, I think it might be a bit of a longer story to get to that point, but I've certainly got I certainly know the moment. My journey through business started in the family business. So I started with on the factory floor at a young age, sort of thing, and growing up in the family business. And fast forward some time, my journey through the family business was starting with the realization that my folks hadn't really set up a sustainable business that was able to be sold or continue on because it was so reliant on them, right? So the first decade of my career was really around trying to sort that out, and I went around and did a number of things through that journey, made some acquisitions, really grew the team and really grew the business. But I was in my 20s, right? So probably the most difficult point was very nearly losing that. And I can recall the point in time, and you get certain bodily sensations when you even talk about that, because I can recall the time of thinking, I I'm not only going to bring this down and fail myself, but I'm going to bring the family down with me. And that was pretty full on at that time. And I recall having to put the wages bill on a personal credit card to get us through. And that was kind of my last throw of the
Mm,
dice. Like,
mm,
how are we going to survive the next week? How are we going to get people paid? So that was definitely the most stressful point in my life, and I
wow.
can very clearly remember it.
All right. And so, your parents, how much trust did they put in you to jump in and make these changes to try and help them? Like they must have believed in you to
Yeah,
do
they
that.
certainly did. I was very, very fortunate that mum and dad very, very much did believe in me. I mean, maybe stupidly. I mean, ultimately we got the result, but and ultimately, we did eventually sell the business out to private equity, and that's where I started my journey through more private equity and corporate. But they put a lot of faith in us. Looking back at that and thinking about what faith I would put in my own children, I think I would say that perhaps there wasn't enough limit to their faith. Perhaps they should have put some more boundaries around that, because obviously we were in our my brother ended up in that environment with me as well, and we're in our 20s, so risk taking was pretty high.
What did you learn growing up in a family business? What do you see, and what are some of the skills you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you learn in a family business, and whether or not you call it a skill or not, but the biggest thing you get out of a family business is a work ethic that is typically a lot higher than general corporate life, right? Like, you understand, growing up in a family business, really a lot of the value, a lot of the values within the family are actually around work delivery, getting things done, and it's a different environment in that sense. So you really learn the value of hard work, and the value of hard work to get something that you want to get to. So I think that's the core difference. I think people that talk to me about that stage, or that I knew during that stage of my life, sort of really couldn't quite grasp the idea that the family was 7 days a week of work, right? It
Mm,
was I'd leave school and go to the office in the afternoons to go and help work. I'd go to work on the weekends to help work. Like, that was the thing.
mm,
It was like the identity of the family, if you like.
yeah. I grew up in a family business as well. Mum and dad had a backpackers hostel, and dad was still booking people in with a pencil, um, and a razor, and bookings got taken off. He would be erasing the booking on the big paper. I couldn't convince him to go to a computer. It was just beyond him. How did you convince your parents to do some things that were probably new age, or from a 20-year-old, you and your brother thinking, hey, we need to modernize this, we need to do things this way? How hard was it for them to change and go with the times?
Yeah, look, I think that was, my father was actually, interestingly enough, my father was an engineer. So, and my father was one of the first in the country back in the the 80s to actually be involved in computers and microprocessors, and he actually built one. He built his first computer.
That would have
So
helped.
he was a little different when it came to
He
technology.
invented the computer.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Not quite, but he was certainly up there in terms of the Australian entry to that sort of stuff. So he not so much. He was very much happy to be led into technology and those sorts of things. And I think he was, if anything, the challenge with him was he was a very technical, engineering um, guy. Like
Mm,
that was his thing. So the challenge was actually changing his thinking from a technical engineer to how do we lead a business and grow a business. And that's the fundamentals of, even through to what I do today is, we are largely working with organizations that have been founder built. They've been founder built by grit and determination to get
mm,
to a certain level, but at a certain point, it becomes more about how you lead the business than about the technical.
mm,
It's not so much about what you do
mm.
anymore. It's about how you build the business and
Yeah.
how you lead the team and how you build the system. So
Mm,
that was probably more of the challenge for me was actually having my father acknowledge that. There was a
mm,
degree to which he sort of felt like if you understand the technical, you'll be right in the
yeah.
business. But getting the journey of going, well, that's only getting us so far, and really we don't have a lot of value in the business because we haven't dealt with, the other things that is
Yeah.
needed.
And quite often you hear in businesses, no one can do it like I can do it.
Hmm.
How do you talk to those people and how do you say, we need you off the tools now?
Yeah, that is a very common thing. And one of the things that becomes really obvious through a conversation with a founder um, at that level of thinking is uh, most have not really thought about the fact that that can't occur in the long term. Most and what part of our journey in the beginning is to get the acceptance that for a business to have a legacy, that really can only happen without you in it. So the first part of a lot of our work is to start to deal with that. And that's an identity thing, and that's an emotional thing, and that's not to do with the technical or the business or anything, but that's a piece of work we've got to go through, and that's
Mm,
not done in 5 minutes. But we have to accept that.
mm,
And you've got the same in your business, and I have in mine.
mm,
The end game can't have a legacy if it's only ever going to rely on me, the same as raw lens can't have a legacy if it's only going to ever rely on you.
mm.
That doesn't mean that we have to deal with, you're out the building right now, but it
Yeah.
means that we have to have a plan to
Yeah.
do that.
How do you deal with that resistance if it does show? And yeah, how does that look? How does that show up? And is it hard conversations? Is it gently showing them the way? How do you deal with that resistance?
It's a little bit of both. It definitely leads to some very hard conversations, but there's for us there's generally quite a trust building exercise that goes on first, and
Yeah.
really starting to understand where the founders head at, and other members of the board or members of the executive team, like
Mm,
really starting to understand that first up. And then it really is very hard conversations. I mean, I think that those that have worked with us realize that we're not at all afraid to have those difficult conversations and call it out how it is. And I think largely that's why
mm,
we are successful, and founders and executive teams want to deal with us, because we really do point out the hard things
mm.
in a respectful way, but
Yeah.
point out the hard thing,
Yeah.
and point it out quite pointedly in the
Yeah.
fact that yes, you might continue to tell me, to use your example, that no one can do it like you,
Mm,
but let's be really clear and frank here. In a board environment, that's unsustainable in the long term.
yeah.
Let's deal with that.
Yeah.
Not let's just go around that subject and pretend it doesn't exist.
Yep. And going full circle, one of the most difficult moments in your life can be that change from coming off the tools and then growing a business that can leave a legacy. What was it like that moment when your parents could finally see the light, so to speak, and sell the business? And was there a relief moment with the shoulders dropping, or what was that
Yeah,
like?
look, I think when we ultimately did get the sale of the business through, there was I think there certainly was a relief moment. I mean, from the decade that had passed to get to that point, there was definitely a relief moment from my parents for sure. There's also a certain sense, I think, of identity loss, and that is one of the things that we deal with all the time. How do you actually change and move the identity? And it goes to the exact point we're talking about. Like, we don't just actually have to change the business, systemize the business, improve the processes, build the team. We also need the identity of the founder to shift.
Yeah.
And in many cases, this is decades and decades of my identity is as the technical expert.
Yeah.
And everybody calls me because I'm the technical expert.
Yeah.
And now I really need to start to think about my role as more like a governance role, a board role, so to speak. And that identity shift is, in my experience, and I saw it with my parents as well in that shift you talk about, is there's a little bit of a almost a grief process that goes and happens there. It's not obviously, quite as dramatic as that, but there is something going on there.
It's a death, identity death,
Identity
or
death.
ego death, or whatever you want to call it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if in the work that we do, if we don't keep a good eye on that and understand that, it can be the difference between success and failure, because we can go and say, systems are great, people's great, process is great. The plan is awesome. Here's the strategy. Like, everything looks fantastic. But if the identity shift hasn't happened for the founder, then it's never going to work. They're going to jump back into that. And I think, many of us have seen the sort of chaos that can happen from, a founder having a great team and then wanting to go and get involved and mess around with that.
Yeah. How many founders actually, start their business and go, I know exactly what my end game is. This is A, I'm going to get to B. See you later, sail off into the sunset.
A total of zero.
Zero.
I don't think I don't think there is a fan. And look, there's a degree to which I don't think that is really realistic. I think we sort of, maybe if you're looking from the outside, you might think that everybody that's sitting in the seat of the founder or the CEO or whatever has all the answers. The reality is that they don't. None of us have all the answers. And if you're founding a business and starting up a business, no amount of planning is going to actually, help for everything in the actual game. That's not. You can plan to the nth degree, and I can tell you by next Tuesday, parts of that are going to be really wrong. So when you're founding and starting to grow a business, there is a lot of experimenting. There is a lot of figuring out who you are, who your customer is, what the customer looks like, how that's going to generate revenue for you. This is a great big game of experimenting in the early stages of founding a business. One of the key challenges is that as you reach a certain scale, which is largely when we get involved in businesses, as you reach a certain scale, that exact mentality is almost opposite to what you need. And that becomes the real challenge here. You've founded a business, you've grown, it's grit, determination, go, just let's go with it. Let's run at it. And then you reach a certain scale when you do have to be very, very conscious of exactly what do I do? Who am I? What customers do I have? And what customers, importantly, do I not have? That's a very, very different mentality to a founder's kind of early growth phase. Yeah. And so there's a real distinct difference there. So I guess in answer to your question, not many have an end game at the beginning, but the real issue is once you reach a certain scale, you're up at, let's say you're 5 or 10 million revenue or whatever it might be, and you're starting to scale up. That's when you really do need to understand the end game. And that's where a lot of businesses, where every business that we start working with, they do not have a good understanding of that.
Yeah. Like many other businesses, I started with passion and grit and determination. I've started Raw Lens. And then, I've had those moments where I've dropped the tools. I still shoot. I still get behind the lens, but, I've got great creatives here that do that for me now, which is fantastic. But I now find myself in Xero and accounting software quite a bit more than I'd like to. What's the danger in that, and what do I do here, Adrian? How do I get out of accounting
advice today?
Well, imagine
this is becoming a consulting.
Yeah, this is free consulting.
Got it. Yeah,
but I don't want to, and I love my business. And I love what we do for clients. I want to spend more time in front of them, doing podcasts, doing this, talking with them. I don't want to be in Xero. I was never good at maths.
Yeah.
What do I do? How do I get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at least identifying it and understanding it is a great thing. I mean, without going into the full details of how to get yourself out of there, you have to get yourself out of there.
Mm,
That's the reality.
mm,
You sitting in accounting software is not the answer.
yeah.
You sitting in there doing the books is not the answer.
Mm,
You are particularly at the size I imagine you are at. You in front of clients, you in front
multi-millions.
of
Oh,
is
billions.
yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
well, that's a different thing. But right now, at the sort of scale that we're talking about, you are in front of clients is the thing.
Yeah.
In front of clients is the thing,
Mm,
and then ultimately, as you scale up more, then other people in front of clients becomes more of the thing. But I don't know a business of a small to medium business that's starting to go on a growth journey.
mm,
I don't know of one that really would be an example of where the founder sitting in the zero
yeah.
is the answer.
Yeah. Get out of there. Get out of
Yeah,
there.
get
Thank
out
you.
of there.
Good
Get
advice.
out of
Get
there.
the hell out of there.
Get out of there.
What's founder overload and what can you do about it?
Yeah, founder. I mean, I think this is it. This is an interesting question and probably has multiple answers to it. But I think going back along the same lines that we were on, founder overload, I think, comes from we start a business and we do everything. You start a business and you do everything. And whenever we do that, now there's a point in time where you can't be in the zero account. There's a point in time where you've got to be out in front of customers. There's a point in time when you've got to empower and lead the team.
Mm,
Um, where is that point in time? There is no single answer to that.
mm,
But founder overload comes from not doing that.
mm,
Founder overload comes from still holding everything, holding every decision, holding every part of the delivery, holding every client engagement, holding everything together. That's what causes it.
mm,
What we do about it is a more structured approach to systems, people, and process. That's at
mm,
core.
mm.
You've got to have systems, you've got to have people, and you've got to have process. And it's not one over the other. It's how those three things come together.
Yeah.
And to deal with founder overload, we really need to think about that as early as possible in our journey.
Mm,
Most businesses, and that's where we deal with a lot. Most businesses don't deal with this early enough. You
mm,
know, the earlier you can deal with it and think about it,
yeah.
that's where you should be spend most of your time either with the customer or thinking about that.
Yeah. Where are the largest structural gaps, do you think, in businesses? Is it the systems and processes? Like if you don't have that there, what do you have?
It does vary per business. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what makes our life so exciting.
Yeah.
It varies a lot per business, and you do see the mentality and personality of the founder coming through that. Different businesses will be stronger on team, weaker on systems. Business will be stronger on systems, weaker on team, and you do get a sense as to the leadership of the founder and how that has led to that.
Mm,
But nearly every business in the family business in the founder space doesn't get that trio working well because it's a dance. The
mm,
systems, process, and people is a dance to get that right. It's not
yeah.
one thing. And I would say the biggest problem I see is it being treated as one answer. And
Mm,
oftentimes, and not always, but oftentimes, the thought is that it is a systems issue, and the bias goes right down the point of if we get this new system in place, everything will be solved.
mm,
And the problem is that systems, as great as they are, and all of the sort of technology that we can put in there, systems must work also with people and process. The
mm,
system in and of itself won't solve people and process problems.
mm,
So that's probably the more common one I see. To sort of broadly answer the question, is the more common one I see is we've over-indexed on technology or systems,
mm.
thinking that that's going to solve all of our people and process problems.
Are you seeing that with AI quite often now? Are people really leaning into that where it's like stand back, look at the people in your business, or what are you seeing in that space?
100%. AI is big, obviously, and the sort of things that AI can do is fantastic. But you do see that deployment of AI and AI working with the people and the process, it actually has created in some areas of business a lot more complexity.
Mm,
So great opportunity, fantastic opportunity for growth for all sorts of things to be better. But it is not dissimilar at all to the challenges that we have with any system.
Mm.
So it is, the real value of AI in a business is going to be working out how to get that to work with the people and the processes in
Mm.
order to drive some profitability outcome. And I guess, to get back onto high horses of mine, that is oftentimes the issue, is that we go in there and we say, oh yeah, I want to go and put this system in or this process in, or I'm going to use AI here, or I'm going to use AI there. But nobody's actually thought, how does that contribute to the earnings of the business or
Mm.
contribute to the end game that we're trying to deal? So
Mm.
we just end up chasing rabbit holes of, this thing's awesome, it sounds
Yeah.
exciting, and it's nobody's thought about how that actually contributes to the end game. We call it, oftentimes talk about it as shiny object syndrome, right? It's
Yeah.
so easy to look at the next, how awesome is that?
Yeah.
Oh, look, it can do my PowerPoint presentations
Yeah.
for me. That's fantastic. But
Mm.
we can end up going down a rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
Of, oh, I've got the best PowerPoint presentations you can ever
Mm.
have. Meanwhile, why are we losing $1,000 a week on whatever? So.
Yeah. What are the best businesses doing? What are the fundamentals that you see time and time again where they're like, that's solid and that works?
Yeah, so the best businesses, I would say, understand the process of running the business better than others. One of the things that I kind of see a lot is that the what's the process, what's the procedure, what's that? People want to talk about those sorts of things, but usually when that conversation starts to happen, the conversation leads down to the accounting process. How does things get put into zero? How does, like, it gets very, very detailed,
Mm.
right? Whenever we talk about it, there's a process to run your business. There's a process to go through, and some of the things I learned from the corporate world and from the ASX listed environments and things is, there's some really, really good learnings out of that about the process of running the business. There's also some corporate stuff in there that you don't really want to, like, we want to discount that.
Yeah.
But the process of the running the business, making sure that you've got a good board structure, a good governance structure, that you understand and that you review things in a process driven way.
Mm.
We know that we review our strategic documents every X amount of time. We know that we bring the right people around the table every X amount of time, and we consider the different perspectives around the business, and that we have that strategy, and that strategy is understood by not just the board, but everywhere along the business. And
Mm.
those that understand that process of building and running a business and knowing what their end game is, knowing where they're going, they're the businesses that succeed. They're the businesses that succeed. The ones that are just, oh, we're going after this, we're going after this.
Yep.
Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Somebody had that idea on Friday when we were having a beer. Now we're putting it in on Monday. Like, they're the businesses that have the problems.
Yep.
You can tell the problems by the reactive nature.
Sure.
Whereas the businesses that do well consider things, also don't get into, decision paralysis that a lot of, boards can get into. There's got to be a good balance there. We don't want to be going, oh yeah, we'll make a decision at the next quarterly board meeting and these sorts of things. That
Yep.
absolutely is not the answer. But having some good process around that strategic development,
Mm.
and importantly, the execution of that within the business.
Yep.
And I think probably more of our work than anything is around execution.
Mm.
We deal with strategy, but there's oftentimes good people around the business with strategy.
Yep.
But how do you actually have a process to execute is a huge part.
Mm. So putting things in the calendar, make sure you stick to the plan, and saying no to shiny objects and things that come at you.
Yep.
Like, how important is it to say no to things?
100%.
Yeah.
But that again is an evolution of business, because
Yeah.
in the beginning,
Saying
you'd
yes.
probably say yes to everything, right?
Yeah.
And you probably have to,
Mm.
because that's the nature of it. Yeah,
Mm.
somebody gives me an opportunity, I'm going after it.
Yep.
As you grow,
Mm.
the clarity of what the end game is for you, what the end game is for the team and the business becomes more and more.
Yeah.
And what becomes important is saying no to the things that distract you from that.
Yeah.
Distraction is, and it's just getting more and more, like,
Mm.
worse and worse now.
Mm.
Like, our whole lives are set up to be distracted.
Yeah.
I think the difference between success and failure of many people is those that have managed to stay focused versus those that want to try and do too much
Yep.
in too short a time frame.
Yeah.
That's the thing that you see all the time. I'm going to do
Guilty.
this and this and this and this and this, and then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to take on this. Like,
Mm.
they're the sorts of people that oftentimes very, very smart, very, very capable people, but get in their own way by allowing themselves to be distracted.
Yeah. Now, you're a commercial pilot, and that's a job where you can't be distracted. How did aviation come into your world, and how does that align with the end game?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's a different sort of a story. So I guess that going back to the family business stuff. So my father was a private pilot, and the business had always run in regional areas of the country. So when we were growing up through that, we were always involved around aviation. I had decided that I was off to be an airline pilot. That was the thing. So I trained as an airline pilot, did some commercial flying stuff, but then obviously went into the family business. So that was the beginning of it. But I've always had such a passion for flying that I and for regional areas that I've always made it a part. So we
Mm,
fly around to see clients in regional areas. We obviously do a fair amount of work in places like the Sunshine Coast, but we're also out in places in rural New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria. So we cover a large area, and we really can only do that because of the aviation capacity
yeah,
that we've got. And we're a very niche business anyway. There's not a lot of people doing what we do for founders. But
yeah,
then if you overlay the fact that we've got the capability in regional Australia, there's no one in regional Australia
yeah.
that's able to have that capacity. So it's a real big differentiator for us.
It sounds like you're living the dream. You're helping businesses, free themselves of that founder type of business, and you're flying around the country. Like, when did that dream? When was that born? Or is it just sort of developed?
Yeah, look, I think I think you're right. I am living the dream. I'm very lucky. I think my old man said to me, work out, find something you love doing, and then work out how to make money out of it. And I think that was good advice at a young age. But yeah, that's me, right? I'm extremely passionate about this. I'm not. I'm doing something that I absolutely love, and something that's so needed for founder businesses, and so relevant to my experience and journey, and I get to fly around. So you can't say much more than living the dream. And I think that has been, as flying around certainly has been the dream always. And certainly the way that I help founders has evolved over time, and started with the passion for doing that with the family.
Do you have an end game?
Yeah, yeah, I do have an end game. And look, the end game as a business is, at the moment there's far more demand for what we do than what we can supply. We're a small niche team, and we are driving hard. We've got some really great, energetic, and enthusiastic people. But ultimately, the end game for the end game is working how to do that, how to be able to provide that service and help at a larger scale. If you look at, particularly in regional areas, you look at economic development theory around regional areas and all the sorts of things that is going on for trying to get investment in the area, and then there's this missing piece that's not dealt with, which is founder led businesses that don't succeed the founder.
Mm,
So there's this great economic opportunity in
mm,
regional areas to actually say, you've got the businesses there, you've got the economic activity. What we need to do is make these businesses survive the founder.
mm,
So the vision really for us is to work on that and find a way to scale that up more than we do at the moment, so that
mm.
we can offer that sort of service to more businesses, and really make more businesses out survive their founders.
Where do you get the most joy in your business?
I mean, it's in the airplane, right?
Yeah.
That is the way we talk about the passion. I do love getting in the aircraft and flying out to,
Mm,
to clients. Like,
yeah.
that's where I'm in my happy place, and I love doing that with the team. We're heading out to see a client on Monday, and there'll be four of us in the plane, and like, that's just it for me. Is you're flying out there, we're talking about the business we're going to, or we're brainstorming about things to try and help
Mm,
founders in general areas, or we're talking about what we're going to do on the ground there. And for me, that is the thing, right? If that's my happy place, is
mm,
doing that sort of stuff, and of course being actually out there on the ground with the founders. I I,
mm,
I love, and the executive teams, and all the people that we work with. Really, that's where I love to be, is out there driving results, for those teams,
mm,
and seeing those results. Like, there's nothing better than seeing, we've had a few in the last year of multi-million dollar improvements to bottom line, and just see the difference that makes to the family, the
mm,
difference that makes to the teams, the fact that you've been able to actually, bring more jobs to regional areas. You've been able to bring more opportunities to those teams and those founders' stress levels. I did have one call me recently to say, I go into the business and I kind of like I don't exactly have that much to do. Like I kick around and I talk to people and I'm like, that's what success looks like, right? That's
Yeah.
what we're here for,
Yep.
is to transition this so that you don't have to be stuck in the weeds.
Yeah.
And hearing that sort of phone call is pretty cool.
Amazing. I'd like to finish off. Well, firstly, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and
Thanks for having me.
personally
It's been great.
consulting me on my zero
Yeah,
and accounting
great.
issues. But it's amazing, as business owners, we all have stresses and challenges, and I think the point of business is to be free of it one day and to empower others and to create more jobs and to the baby you've created for that to just help more and more people. So you are helping people do that, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for having me, Tom. Really enjoyed it.
No worries.
Yeah.
No worries. I'd like to finish on this question, and that is, where is Adrian Nisbet? I think I know the answer to this already. Where is Adrian Nisbet at most peace?
Yes, well, we know. Where is Adrian Nisbet at most peace? It's at 20,000 feet.
Great answer. Thank
Thanks,
you, Adrian.
Tom. Cheers.